Family Affair was one of the 60s most popular TV shows.
We had the kaleidoscope going with all the different colors and with that unforgettable ditty da 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 da.
You think you know Family Affair as the heartwarming sitcom about a bachelor uncle, his proper British butler, and 3 adorable children learning life lessons in a luxurious New York apartment. But the real story behind those smiling faces is one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. Behind Mr. French's stern wisdom and Buffy's innocent pigtails were child exploitation, crushing addiction, and deaths so tragic they would haunt everyone who survived. Brian Keith, Sebastian Cabot, and the child stars weren't living the perfect family life they portrayed. They were trapped in a nightmare that would destroy some of them and scar the rest forever. What you're about to discover will devastate you. A child star dead from overdose at 18 after years of exploitation, an alcoholic lead actor who would eventually take his own life, and a so-called family show that violated child labor laws while stealing children's earnings. The apartment was a set, but the suffering was heartbreakingly real. Don Feddersen, producer, and the creation. Don Feddersen's creation of Family Affair represented innovative thinking for 1960s television. A bachelor uncle suddenly responsible for raising his orphan nieces and nephew challenged traditional family sitcom formulas built around married couples and biological parents. The premise of Bill Davis, a wealthy engineer, hiring a British butler to help raise children he never wanted, created comedy from domestic chaos while exploring non-traditional family structures. The British butler concept proved unexpectedly brilliant, as Sebastian Cabot's Mr. French became the show's breakout character and emotional anchor. Audiences responded more enthusiastically to the proper gentleman's fish-out-of-water struggles with American children than to Brian Keith's bachelor uncle, shifting the show's dynamic toward Cabot's dry wit and surprising warmth. French's combination of stern discipline and genuine affection created a father figure more compelling than the actual guardian. CBS initially expressed skepticism about the unconventional family structure, fearing that audiences wouldn't accept a single man raising children or that the premise would generate controversy about proper child rearing. Network executives worried that the show might appear to endorse non-traditional families during an era when conservative family values dominated television. Feddersen had to convince them that the butler's presence provided necessary propriety and that the show would reinforce traditional morality despite its unusual setup. Feddersen's production factory approach treated sitcom creation as efficient assembly line process, with multiple camera setups, quick shooting schedules, and formulaic storytelling that prioritized consistency and budget management over artistic innovation. This industrial approach to television production maximized profits while minimizing creative risk, creating wholesome entertainment that offended no one and challenged nothing. Family Affair became the template for Feddersen's subsequent productions, establishing his reputation as a reliable supplier of safe, profitable family programming. Brian Keith, Bill Davis. Brian Keith arrived at Family Affair as a reluctant television star who viewed the medium as inferior to film, but accepted the steady paycheck and job security that weekly series provided. His preference for cinematic work and stage acting made the repetitive sitcom grind feel artistically stifling, creating resentment that he masked with professionalism, but that simmered beneath his cheerful on-screen persona. Alcohol struggles plagued Keith throughout Family Affair's production, though he successfully hid the extent of his drinking from most cast and crew members. He would arrive at the studio hungover but functional, relying on professional discipline to deliver competent performances despite the previous night's indulgence. His alcoholism was the Hollywood variety, maintaining career obligations while slowly destroying himself physically and emotionally through daily drinking that never quite crossed into complete dysfunction. Keith's genuine affection for the child actors, particularly Anissa Jones and Johnny Whitaker, provided some of the production's few authentic emotional connections. Unlike many adult actors who viewed child co-stars as professional inconveniences, Keith treated them with patience and warmth, becoming a genuine father figure who protected them from the industry's harsher realities. His method parenting approach meant actually caring about their well-being rather than simply hitting marks and delivering lines. Career resentment intensified as Family Affair's success trapped Keith in television when he had envisioned himself as serious film actor. Each season renewed meant another year committed to sitcom mediocrity rather than pursuing challenging dramatic roles in cinema. The financial security was undeniable and necessary. Keith had family, obligations, and expenses. But the artistic compromise felt increasingly like selling out his talent for middle-class respectability. Personal tragedy would haunt Keith for decades after Family Affair ended. His daughter Daisy committed suicide in 1997, a devastating loss that Keith never fully processed or recovered from. The guilt, grief, and unanswerable questions about whether he could have prevented her death consumed him in his final years, contributing to the depression and despair that would eventually lead to his own suicide in 1997, just months after Daisy's death. Sebastian Cabot, Mr. French. Sebastian Cabot's British gentleman persona represented carefully cultivated image that diverged significantly from his actual personality and background. While he was genuinely British, his aristocratic bearing and refined speech patterns were theatrical constructions rather than authentic reflections of his working-class origins. Cabot had trained as actor and understood that his physical appearance and vocal qualities suited playing upper-class characters, so he developed Mr. French's particular blend of stern propriety and hidden warmth through technique rather than personal identification. Weight issues plagued Cabot throughout Family Affair's run, as his significant obesity created serious health problems that threatened production schedules and eventually forced temporary replacement. His size wasn't merely aesthetic concern, but genuine medical crisis. The physical demands of television production, even sitcom work requiring minimal activity, stressed his cardiovascular system and joints. Studio executives worried constantly about Cabot's ability to complete seasons and whether insurance would continue covering someone whose weight made him high risk for heart attack or stroke. The replacement crisis occurred when Cabot's health deteriorated so severely during the fourth season that production had to write Mr. French out temporarily and hire John Williams to play French's brother Giles as substitute. This emergency substitution lasted several episodes while Cabot recovered, creating continuity problems and audience confusion about why the beloved character had suddenly vanished. The incident demonstrated how dependent the show had become on Cabot's presence, and how his health issues jeopardized the entire production's viability. The real Sebastian off-screen contrasted with his proper butler image in ways that surprised those who knew him personally. He could be bawdy, irreverent, and considerably less refined than Mr. French, enjoying off-color jokes and casual behavior that would have horrified his character. This divergence between actor and role was professional necessity rather than deception. Cabot understood that audiences wanted Mr. French's propriety, not Sebastian Cabot's actual personality. Early death came at 59 when Cabot suffered a fatal stroke in 1977, just 6 years after Family Affair ended. His obesity and related health issues had caught up with him, and his body simply gave out decades earlier than it should have. His death was the first in what would become a tragic pattern of Family Affair cast members dying young or violently, beginning the show's reputation as cursed. Anissa Jones, Buffy, the tragic child star. Anissa Jones' story represents child exploitation at its most devastating. An adorable little girl turned into a money-making commodity, worked beyond legal limits, robbed of her childhood and earnings, then discarded by the industry that had consumed her youth. Her death at 18 from drug overdose was not tragic accident, but the predictable end result of systematic abuse by parents, producers, and a Hollywood system that valued profit over children's welfare. The adorable icon image of Buffy with her blonde pigtails talking to her Mrs. Beasley doll created a marketable persona that trapped Anissa in perpetual childhood long after she had outgrown the character. The Mrs. Beasley doll became a massive merchandising success, generating millions in profits that Anissa saw almost none of, while her image sold products and created licensing deals that enriched everyone except the child whose likeness was being exploited. Her stage mother, Mary Paula Jones, epitomized the worst of Hollywood parenting, viewing her daughter as meal ticket rather than child needing protection and normal development. Paula controlled Anissa's career completely, making decisions based on financial benefit rather than her daughter's well-being, pushing her to work maximum hours regardless of exhaustion or educational needs. the mother-daughter relationship became transactional rather than nurturing, with Paula extracting value from Anissa's marketability while providing minimal emotional support or genuine parenting. Lost childhood meant Anissa worked adult hours under conditions that violated child labor laws, received inadequate education from on-set tutors who prioritized production schedules over learning, and never experienced normal social development with peers outside the industry. Tragic death came on August 28, 1976, when 18-year-old Anissa Jones died from combined drug intoxication in the bedroom of a friend's house in Oceanside, California. The official cause was listed as overdose from cocaine, PCP, Quaaludes, and Seconal, a horrifying cocktail of substances that suggested desperation rather than recreational use. Johnny Whitaker and Kathy Garver. Johnny Whitaker's survival of child stardom as Jody represented the crucial difference that protective parenting could make. Unlike Anissa Jones, whose mother exploited her, Whitaker had parents who prioritized his well-being over maximum earnings, ensuring he received proper education, maintained relationships with non-industry peers, and understood that acting was job rather than identity. This fundamental difference in parental approach meant Whitaker avoided the addiction and identity crisis that destroyed Jones. Avoiding Jones' fate wasn't luck, but result of deliberate choices by Whitaker's family. They limited his working hours even when producers wanted more, insisted on proper schooling that met educational standards rather than accepting minimal on-set tutoring, and created home environments separate from Hollywood where Johnny could be normal child rather than professional commodity. When Family Affair ended, Whitaker's parents made the controversial decision to pull him out of show business entirely during his teenage years, believing that normal adolescent development mattered more than career momentum. This decision cost him potential earnings and career opportunities, but probably saved his life. Kathy Garver's experience as Sissy, the teenage sister, involved different challenges than the younger children faced. She was older when the show began, already established in the industry, and dealing with the specific pressures that teenage actresses encountered in the 1960s Hollywood. The transition from child roles to adult careers proved particularly difficult for young women, who aged out of cute kid parts but struggled to be taken seriously for adult roles. Garver's time on Family Affair occurred during her crucial developmental years from ages 16 to 21, making the show's demands particularly significant in her personal growth. Career aftermath diverged dramatically for the three child actors. Whitaker eventually quit acting to pursue normal life, earning a college degree and working outside entertainment before occasionally returning for nostalgia projects. Garver persisted in the industry with modest success, understanding that she would never achieve the fame of Family Affair again, but carving out sustainable career in character roles and voice acting. Jones, of course, never had the chance to choose her path, dying before she could determine what life after child stardom might have looked like. Their guilt about not saving Anissa haunted both Garver and Whitaker for decades. They recognized in retrospect the warning signs they had been too young to understand or act upon at the time. Anissa's increasing unhappiness, her mother's exploitative behavior, the desperation in her attempts to escape. Garver eventually wrote a book about her Family Affair experience that included frank discussion of what happened to Anissa, partly as therapeutic processing of survivors' guilt, and partly as warning to protect future child actors from similar fates. The Family Affair Curse and Legacy. The deaths that accumulated around Family Affair cast created reputation as cursed production. Anissa Jones's overdose at 18, Sebastian Cabot's stroke at 59, and Brian Keith's suicide at 75 represented tragedy accumulation that exceeded statistical probability. While curse language is superstitious rather than analytical, the pattern suggested that something about the show's production or its participants' experiences created lasting trauma and dysfunction that contributed to premature deaths. Kathy Garver's book, The Family Affair Cookbook, and subsequent memoir, Surviving Sissy, exposed truths about the production that Wholesome Image had concealed for decades. She described child labor violations, the exploitation Anissa suffered, Brian Keith's alcoholism, and the dysfunction hidden behind the perfect family facade. Her willingness to break the silence about what really happened contradicted Hollywood's preference for maintaining comforting illusions about beloved shows. But Garver felt moral obligation to prevent future Anisas by telling the truth. Failed revival attempts demonstrated that Family Affair's premise couldn't be recaptured because the original show's appeal was inseparable from its specific cast and cultural moment. A 2002 television movie remake and other proposed reboots foundered because they couldn't recreate the chemistry or navigate the awareness of what had happened to the original cast. The tragedy had become inseparable from the nostalgia, making straightforward revival feel disrespectful to Anissa's memory and the other cast members who had suffered. Family Affair proved that television's perfect families often hide the darkest truths. Feddersen, Keith, Cabot, and the children didn't just make a wholesome sitcom, they created a beautiful lie that consumed the most vulnerable among them, leaving Anissa Jones dead at 18 and the survivors carrying guilt and grief that would haunt them forever. Subscribe to discover more devastating truths behind television's most beloved shows and the child stars Hollywood destroyed.